All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of It's Personal. And I'll say it again. I say it on every episode. I am very selfishly. I can invite whoever I want to because it's like my podcast. But I'm always excited. But I'm extremely excited today because we've been trying to do this for a while, and I just found out that my girl's been going through it. So I appreciate her so much, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. This is Samira Ahmed. Yes, I've been going through some things, but all good, all good. And I'm just happy to be here chatting with you, Gary.
No, I appreciate you so much. And I have so much to ask you just because I admire both my wife and I admire so much of what you do as an educator, as a writer, as a mom, as a sister, as all the things. We appreciate you in this household
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you.
So, before anything, I'm sending you all the flowers right now because
Oh, you're so
you
kind.
and your
Thank
sister are two people that we speak highly of and appreciate in this world. So,
Yeah, my
thank you
sister
for all the
Sarah.
things.
She's good. She's a keeper.
Yes. She is. She is. So I'll start by asking you, like, just how are things going right now? We talked about it a little bit before we came on. It's good to see you, but how are things going in general right now for you?
Good, good. Well, I just had a book that came out. This book won't burn. So then I was on tour, and while it's always like exciting and fun to meet readers. I mean, it's so cool, and but it's also kind of exhausting. And it's not like sometimes people like when I first went on tour in 2018 for my first novel, Love, Hate, and Other Filters, it like, I didn't know what tour was gonna be like and whatever, and then people who were not in publishing, like my friends who were just like, non-publishing people, it was sort of I think they sort of glamorized it. They're like, "Wow, you're gonna do events in, like, Chicago and New York and LA and, like, Atlanta and, like, whatever," and I was like, "Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but it's not like a rock star tour." It's not like okay, I am like Springsteen or Beyonce or, it's not like something like that, but, it's definitely a lot more low key. There's no wild night partying. You're basically after the bookstore event, you're like, "I'm just tired now, so I'm gonna go make some herbal tea and order room service."
It's so true.
It's like, just chill, but and then you're like but it's also the coolest part of it is meeting readers. So that was really
Mhm.
fun. And on my tours, I started doing this one in tournament, and then there was like this big thing called the pandemic that prevented me from going on doing a lot of tours. But I actually try to. I take with me like my own copy of the book, like the first hardcover that I get, and I
Mhm.
have everyone who comes to any events or like festivals sign the book,
I
sign
love
my book.
that idea. I love that idea.
Like, so great. There's a picture of it on my Insta if people wanna go look, but it's like my sort of my souvenir of the book tour, and it's
Mhm.
actually awesome because some people sign it like it's a yearbook, and they're like, "Have a cool summer," or whatever. But then other people will just I mean, some people just, like, sign it, which is cool, and then some people are like, "I'm gonna find my favorite number," and I'm like, "Sign it wherever you want." And so then I have this hardcover, so it's of This Book Won't Burn, and there's people who've signed it all over, and then you can flip through it, and then there's a surprise, like, page 72, and some kid will circle it, and there'll be like, "This is my favorite number," or, "This is my jersey number," or, you know then I also had a bunch of librarians sign it when I was at the Texas Library Association, and it was,
Mhm.
like, so cute because they were coming to my signing line, and one of them was like, "No one's ever asked me for my autograph before," and
That's
so I
dope.
love that idea of, like, well, I'm signing a book for you, so you sign a book for me,
I
and
love
then I get to keep it as, like, a memento or souvenir, and there's, like, lots of cool messages in there, and it's from, like, kids from, like, every age, like, I mean, I was just at the American Writers Festival last weekend in Chicago, and there was a kid who came to my event, and I think she was, like, 12 or 13, so she drew, like, a little bunny on it, like, and
that.
signed it
That's
with, like,
cute.
it's very cute, very cute. So, that's, like that is also a great reminder because, like, publishing can be exhausting. It's a tough industry, but having those little mementos is an awesome reminder of, like, "Okay, this is why I'm doing it for the readers."
Mhm, mhm. That's such a great idea because it then, like, you'll never forget that little girl with the buddies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. it's just yeah, it's really cute. I'll never forget her. I won't forget, like, this librarian who was like, "Oh my gosh, you're asking me for my autograph." There's, like, so many nice little messages that readers wrote to me, and then I also get my other like, my colleagues, my fellow authors to sign it, which is also
Mm,
kind of fun. And the best is, like, when you get, like, an illustrator, and then,
yes.
then they also like, because I love when people put little illustrations in there, like this little girl and her bunny. It's anyway, yeah, so highly recommend for everyone to do that because it's really fun.
No, that is awesome, and I'm assuming the tour went well.
Yeah, I mean, it was really great, and, it's publishing is sending fewer and fewer people on book tour, so I feel like it's a privilege to be able to go
Mhm.
because a lot of times now it's like the really, like the ginormous authors, like the authors who sell like hundreds of thousands of books and stuff like
Yep,
that. So
yep.
being able to still have my publisher support me so I can go on, to some events is great.
Mhm.
And I I was at Books of Wonder in New York, which was like also where I launched. I've done like 3 launches there, and so that's always kind of it's always sort of nice to go back and, the booksellers are still there,
Yeah, yeah.
and, your friends come out. In I did one in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I didn't really know anyone in St. Paul, so, I was like, "Okay, hopefully some people come out." But the cool thing about that was we arranged it so that 2 eighth graders, 2 boys read my book, and then they
Mhm.
were the ones who were my interlocutors, like, they
Ooh, I like
us.
that. I like that.
It was so great,
Uh-huh.
and 'cause, eighth graders are they just will ask you anything, and kids are awesome because they don't have, like, those filters that adults do, and they're not, like, embarrassed about things in the I mean, kids get embarrassed, but not about they usually get embarrassed because of their parents, like,
Yes. Yes. Totally,
right?
totally.
They're
Yeah.
embarrassed about, like, cringy stuff, but
Uh-huh.
so This Book Won't Burn is about book banning and censorship, and, it's set in this small town, and, there's, like, a really terrible school board president who's, like, leading this charge of book banning, and a group of, like, parents who are, trying to ban, like, all the queer and BIPOC books, and
Mhm.
a terrible principal too, and so this this 8th grade boy, and he's in St. Paul, so he's in a pretty liberal area, he's, like,
Mhm.
definitely in a blue dot, so he says, "How did you create this town and this school that's just so terrible?" He was just like, "Man, I can't believe you did this," and, then I had to unfortunately burst his bubble and say, "Well, everything I wrote about in this book are actually things that I took from real life events." And
Mhm.
so, unfortunately, there are some really terrible, school board members and
Mhm.
principals and whatnot. So, yeah, so I was like, I based it on reality, and he was, like, mind blown because but also it's also great because I love that he thought it was so fantastical almost,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that's showing that, people are the adults in that community, that means they're trying to do the right thing, and what was
Mhm.
so cute is his English teacher came too,
Oh, fun.
and also a librarian from that school.
Oh,
So and of course, I was like, "Okay, give these kids extra credit."
yes, 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 and it's so funny because, like, I wasn't originally going to talk about the book first, but, like, since we're talking about it, let's just dive in. You
Yeah.
when as I'm reading, and me and my wife me and Erin talk about this all the time, you are so much about the culture. Like, the books that you write are so much about the kids in the world and the things that are happening now, and as I was reading this book, I could not stop writing notes, listening to all of the connections to the real world. And one of the things I loved was the mother and daughter relationship, the ups and downs, the way that you were able to like. If for those of you who haven't read it, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit about the development of that because there were some really hard moments in the story where Noor and her mom were like duking it out,
Yeah.
and there are moments when I can't remember the exact line where the mom was like, I think it was when the dad had come to the house and was talking to them, and she kind of stepped back and she said, something along the lines of like, sometimes you have to be quiet or step down for another reason. And I was like, wow, like for you to do that in front of your daughter who is like, all about the culture and the people,
Mhm.
and at the same time knowing that internally you want to say something, but right now
Yeah.
isn't the moment. Like that was such a powerful scene for me, like visually. Tell me about the relationship and tell me how you created that.
Yeah, so Noor's my main character, and she's basically reeling from this trauma, which is her father has abandoned their family,
Mhm.
and kind of completely shocking everybody because it seemed to be going great. Like they're doing family dinners, they got pizza night, they got like all the things going
Mhm.
on. And then he's just like, I can't do this anymore. And
Mhm.
leaves a note and basically just leaves the family. And this is actually a thing called wife abandonment syndrome. It's like an
Mhm.
actual thing. And I read so many sad stories about it. And so I was like, you know what? I want to write about this. I had a friend who had gone through something similar, and I talked to her about it and got sort of
Mhm.
permission to tell a little bit of that story. And so then Noor's mom was normally this kind of outgoing person, completely goes inside herself. Like
Mhm.
she's depressed
Different person,
completely. But
right?
everyone has a different response to trauma.
Mhm. Mhm.
The mom ups and like moves the kids out of Chicago, the town they love, because she just is like, everywhere I go, there's like a memory of my husband and
Mhm.
your dad, and I can't. So she
Mhm.
takes a job in a small town, and when Noor gets there, like the library is like her one hangout place. Like in her school, she and her friends would go there like after lunch. They would go chill.
Yeah.
They would do their homework. A lot of kids use the library that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a place to pick up books, but it's a place where all kids should be welcome.
Mhm.
The library she goes to in her new school, she sees 500 books getting pulled
Yeah.
from bookshelves, and she's like, I just want to keep my head down and get through senior year. But she also is kind of a firebrand, and she's like, I just can't keep my mouth shut about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when she starts to really, really butt heads with her mom
Mhm.
because Noor has a little sister and Amal, and she also takes over she almost takes on a parental role,
Yeah.
taking care of her sister because the mom is just so absent.
Mhm.
But then as Noor starts getting attention for like trying to stand up to this bully of a principal and a terrible like MAGA school board president and stuff, the mom is like, you've got to chill, honey, because
I know.
we don't want to attract this kind of bad attention. And Nora's
Yeah.
like, no, what happened to you? You were the one who took me to my first protest and all this
Yeah.
stuff. But the mom is just like, can't deal with it. And then like the terrible school board member comes and he does this thing called Midwestern Nice.
Oof.
He comes and is like, I'm welcoming you to the town where we know that you have the same values as us. Midwestern Nice for people who aren't from the Midwest is basically a very nice way to cast aspersions, microaggressions, and
Uh-huh.
to essentially low key threaten somebody, but you do it with like a smile on your face. Like,
You wrote that to perfection.
well, I'm a Midwesterner, so I totally get it. And so Noor comes upon them like when she's coming home from school and she sees the school board member and he's this kind of large man who's like kind of bullying the mom, but in this Midwestern nice way. And Nora's like, why the heck didn't you say anything?
Mhm.
And her mom's like, her mom basically says like sometimes you have to pick the time to fight. Sometimes you have to be
Yes.
quiet.
Yes.
And Nora doesn't really understand that because Nora's like this young, like activist, and she's got a lot of outrage.
Mhm.
And what she's sort of learning from her mom, a little bit, even though her mom is also messed up,
Mhm.
is that sometimes you have to lead in your mind with outcome instead of outrage.
Yes.
Outrage is obviously a motivating factor. I'm personally a fan of rage, but at the same time, if you're trying to accomplish something, sometimes you got to just take a step back and breathe. But also, Noor's mom is in the position of still being the adult, and
Mhm.
as a parent, your number one is protect your kids.
Yeah.
your kid's
That's
safe.
what she's trying, and that's what she's really trying to do. She's trying to make sure that Noor and her sister are okay. That's what she really wants to do. And I mean, you did such a great job of building their relationship and, you know, showing so many like nuances within the family dynamics and then having them in school. I just really appreciated how much time the story spent having them having conversation. I thought that was I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
I
It was
enjoyed it
actually
so much.
the parental relationship was one that I actually had to work on and I did revisions on, so thank you for saying that because I wanted to make sure I mean, first of all, for people who don't know, I'm Indian American, I'm Muslim, like, kid of immigrants,
Mhm,
and I think a lot of, like, actually BIPOC authors or BIPOC individuals who aren't even immigrants necessarily can understand this, but your parents play a role in your
mhm.
life, whether
Yep,
you want to or want them to or not.
yep.
And a lot of YA has absent parents. I mean, obviously the dad is a bad on the family, so he's absent, but the parents a lot of the parents in my books are kind of like in the business of the
Mm,
kids
mhm,
because that's like realistic. Like
mhm.
I think I have like multiple books where there's like these scenes where the kid is like the door is shut and the parent like kind of just walks in or kind of will do like this half knock and walk in at the same time.
Yeah,
And the kid's
yeah.
like, "What? You didn't knock, like, what? Just give me my
I'm coming
privacy."
anyway.
Yeah, and the mom's like or the dad is like, "Why do you need privacy? What are you trying to hide from us? This is our home." Like, I was like, that obviously is something I could relate to.
Yeah, yeah, and you talk about I mean, this is so interesting because we talk about the mom and how there was a moment where she said, "Sometimes you have to be quiet." My question for you is like and again, within I'd say all of your books, like you're not quiet. You are constantly pushing the needle, sharing information that I think like these books are going to go down in history for like texts where you can really go back and look at what was happening then and what effect it has on the future. So what are the reasons that make you what makes you go? What makes you continue to go?
So I love writing so right now, obviously, the big thing in YA, like, if you look at the bestseller list, it's, like, mostly fantasies. So
Yeah.
I'm not doing myself any, like, career favors, but, I mean, and I read fantasy too, and I love it. I think there's a it's important for a lot of kids. Um, but for me, contemporary is really important to write, and I know those kids who are picking that book up and why they need it.
Mhm.
And I always say that I am motivated to write contemporary because I like to write the world as it is so we can imagine the world as it could be. Like
Mm.
books are right, we know that books are like their own world. They're portals to your different worlds. They should be sparking your curiosity. They should be making you ask questions. Sometimes they should be making you uncomfortable. And all of my books, I know part of the reason some of my books get banned is because some folks are not comfortable with the what's in the books. And I don't mean like, sex because there's none of that in my books,
Uh-huh.
but, people don't like to feel uncomfortable when I talk about, say, racism or Islamophobia or
Uh-huh.
homophobia or, you know, it makes them have so much discomfort, and I'm always like, "Well, okay." And it's usually
Yeah,
the adults who are the ones who are uncomfortable. I'm like, "Just deal with it because this is just a fictional kid in a book. Imagine the actual discomfort that a human
sure,
being is
sure.
feeling, a kid who's experiencing any of these prejudices or, this trauma of the dad leaving the family, like, your discomfort,
Mhm.
if you are so like, cannot stand a moment of that, then understand, like, still how privileged you are that you're
Mhm.
like, "I'm uncomfortable because of reading a book,"
Yeah.
versus the many kids and many of us who are uncomfortable or who feel that discomfort in our daily life just, like, by walking on the damn sidewalk.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, I said this to this woman who came to one of my readings, and she was a very well-intentioned, like, Midwestern mom, like, a middle-aged white woman.
Mhm.
I'm sure she voted for Democrats. She voted for Barack Obama for sure. she was sort of asking about the book, and I said she was asking me sort of about why I was picking some of these topics and like whatever, and I was like, I didn't even really answer the question. I just said, you know what? Sometimes in my life, I wonder what it would be like to walk down the street as a white woman.
Mm,
And I said, just with regular problems, like maybe my problems are like, damn, I couldn't afford the groceries that I wanted. Maybe my problems are like, my kid is getting in trouble at school. Maybe my problems are like, I can't quite afford the mortgage, or, I have a difficult relationship with my parents, or something's happening with my partner. Like the regular person problems. I was like,
mhm,
because I completely get that you have those, person that I don't know. But
mhm.
what you don't have is all the
The
extra.
other stuff. All the other stuff. Uh-huh.
And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I am never gonna, she's like, I never had anyone say that to me. And I never thought about it in that way. And she was obviously uncomfortable with it. But what I really appreciated about her is that she was like, I accept this as a question or as a statement that you make that I've never had to confront, or I've never been asked before. Like, can you imagine what it would be like to walk down the street as me? She obviously can't, nor
Yeah.
can I imagine what it would be like to walk down the street with her as
Uh-huh.
her, and she's like, "I'm not gonna forget that because, yeah, it's so much easier for me to walk down the street than for you."
Wow. Wow.
And I loved that she was open to it, and so that is a great example of someone who was uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but also had enough, I don't know if it's like, I guess it's almost like self-confidence to
Mhm.
understand where I was coming from and why maybe her discomfort was okay, and it was fine that I put that proposition out there, like, I wonder what it would be like to walk down the street as a white woman.
Yeah.
Like, some people might find that very provocative and get upset, and she took it as, "Whoa, this gives me something to think about."
Wow.
That's like I think that was great for her to actually take it in that way.
Mhm. I think so too. And brave. Like,
Yeah.
she didn't have to. She coulda cried.
Yeah,
She
she
coulda
coulda cried,
cried.
she did, yes, she coulda called you crying. I've had that happen,
Yeah, she coulda
but
cried.
we all have had that. "I'm so sorry, I
Yeah.
can't believe this."
And you know
I
what
was
it
like,
makes me think of? It thinks makes me think about Nora's situation, how she had so many ups and downs in the story and how she had to face a lot of white people. I think about the party that she went to,
"Oh, yeah."
and, like, goodness gracious, like, there were so many moments that I was like, I remember these moments. Like, you go in, you're scanning the room, you're looking around, you're
The only
looking for the
one.
exit, you're the only one. And I remember this quote, and literally stopped and I messaged her in right away. Where I think, was it James? I think she told James, "You have Proud Boy written all over you," and I lost it. I said, "I can't." I was on the floor, on the floor. But I say that because I love that Nora was able to navigate those situations quickly and stand on her own too. Because oftentimes, at least speaking for myself, I was unable to do that when I was younger because you're just scared. You just don't know what's going to happen in those situations. So you leave, you exit, you don't come back, etc. But I really enjoyed how she was able to bite back. I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's, she's scared, but she's acting out of her fear too. But I mean, she
Mhm.
also had, like, in that moment, like, that's actually, I'm so glad that you brought up that scene, because if you as a black man were entering that scene, it would be a completely different situation.
Totally.
That would have been a time where Nora's mom would be telling you, sometimes it's time to be quiet,
Mhm.
because you could have gotten in much more trouble in that situation than Noor, because Noor entered that scene like it was like after school, like it was an evening scene, like, but she enters it with a white boy
Mhm.
there with her.
Mhm.
And, she's South Asian,
Mhm.
um, and she's not black, and people have to understand the sort of different kinds of privilege that come, like, people have to understand sort of, like, I don't know, like, how colorism works,
Mhm.
but So she would enter that situation with a little more privilege than somebody, say, like a young black man entering that situation. She
Mhm.
also had a ride there with a boy who who's problematic, but that she sort of liked. I mean, sometimes we like problematic kids, but he
Mhm.
also was a one of the wealthier kids in the area. He
And
had,
liked. He was liked.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was a popular kid.
Yeah.
So she did have, even if in her mind she's not thinking of all those things, and no teen is thinking of all those things
No.
as
You're
they're
right.
coming. They She still had those things. And so for me as a writer, I can still write that scene knowing that yes, she's putting herself in an unsafe spot in a way, but she also has a way to get out of it. Would I
Yeah.
have written that same thing if she was a young black girl? I don't know, because I don't want to put a character in a situation that's not realistic unless I followed it up with her getting in, say, even more of a dangerous situation than Nora was in that moment,
Yeah.
or
I
getting a threat to call the cops. Like,
Yes.
that would be the thing, like, the owner of, like, the store or whatever, the ice cream place they're at coming out and saying, like, "What's this ruckus? I'm calling the cops." Like,
Mhm.
I probably
Mhm.
would have added that to the scene.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I try to write it with the nuance of, like, the reality of how it is for different kids, but I do love that Noor is a spitfire. Like, I wanted her to be that way because 'cause I've met kids like that, and so have you,
Same,
right?
same. That's why I think I was so attached to her as the protagonist, and just like, you know, I couldn't take my eyes off the page because I wanted to know how she was going to react to all these like ups and downs. I want to. We can talk about the book the whole time because I'm just like so into it right now. But you have to talk to me about the prom situation and how that was just like. I mean, good gosh, like how do you?
Wait, do you know what the inspiration for that was? Because I am like an '80s kid, so I'm, like,
Uh,
aging myself right now, but so I jokingly called this book, I was like, with my '80s references, I was like, "It's sort of like Footloose meets Pretty in Pink, but with book banning."
I maybe that's why I loved it too, because like I was born in '88, but I'm such an '80s and '90s, like that's where I am. So that might be one of the reasons why I also loved it.
Because, like, people in the original Footloose with Kevin Bacon, in that town, it was like a small town, and people but probably don't remember this, but at the very beginning, they start talking about books that are being banned, like books that are
Mhm.
being but then it becomes about dancing, because, like, watching Kevin Bacon just read a book would be so boring. Movie. And then in so yes, there's this Pretty in Pink moment where the boy asks her to prom, but then basically due to peer pressure, backs out of this, and she forces him to, like, say it. Like,
It's so intense. It is so intense.
he basically ghosts her, and she will not let him ghost her. So
It was
she could
intense.
ghost him in the hallway, but in that situation, I also had a couple friends that were close by because I wanted it, because he had his, like, little posse, the Proud
Mhm.
Boy posse,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she had a couple friends who were close by too, because I wanted it to also be, there has to be some modicum of in a school, there's gonna be other people there, so I didn't want her to be totally alone in that situation, but I mean, she's the part of her that's like me, I think, is like when I get mad, I when I get, like, really mad, I cry, and so that makes me and it somehow makes me more rageful because then I'm like, "Damn it, I'm so mad right now, and then you made me cry on top of it, and now
Yeah.
I'm gonna force you to admit it," like, because I know I am making this situation it's so cringy, uncomfortable, but I'm just gonna take you on that ride with
You're
me
like all
because
you're like all in now.
yeah, exactly. I was like, "Now you can't back off," and her friends are the ones who kinda have to, like, get her to, like, come out of the situation. Because sometimes you're like, "Okay, crap, dang, I'm just all in right now."
Yeah. I mean, I another scene. There's so many scenes in this book that I was like, gosh, I just fell in love with them. Like, and then I mean, there's so many, but another one that stands out for me is the moment that Nora's in the kitchen, and it's not necessarily a relationship yet, but she's in the kitchen and they're cooking together, and
Oh,
she's
yes, this is,
talking
like, the other
about
love it. Yes, there is
her.
kind of a love triangle, I
It
love it.
is, oh, it's so well done. You talk about the spices and how they think, oh, it's just so well done. It's
Honestly,
we're
that
giving
was
away the
just
whole story. So if you're listening, we apologize. Well, I don't really apologize, but this is the whole story. We're telling you the whole story.
well, I love trying to have food in my books because obviously for Indians, food is really important, and I mean, for so many people, food is like their love language. Like, I'm gonna
Mm,
cook something for you, and I mean, look, food in our cultures are just a way we can relate to each other,
mhm.
and if you go to any Indian's house, as you know, it smells like food.
Yeah,
There's always gonna be the smell of, like, kind of
spice,
like fried onions, garlic, ginger's gonna be in there, there's probably
paprika.
gonna be some, like, red pepper. There's if they're just making, like, masala chai, there's gonna be, like, cardamom floating around, some
Mhm.
fennel smells, and so that's, like, the smell of childhood to me, and I was like, "Yeah, I wanted to have this cooking scene," and also because I like that it was, like, the boy, he's, like, the only other, like, Muslim kid, and she at first is like, "No," it's like, so, if you're the only 2, then people naturally, like, ship you just because, like, well, you're the only 2 that are the same,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so, like,
yeah,
"Hey, you're brown, he's brown, shouldn't you be," and so Noor does become friends with him, but she kind of is also like, "No, I can't actually have am I having feelings for him? No, that's
yeah,
weird, because
uh-huh,
if I'd seen with him, what would the aunties say, and, like, what would happen, and,
yeah.
like, all this stuff," but it's just, like, this sweet moment of cooking, and it was also just, like, a moment of, like, sort of tension relief too,
Mhm.
because she kind of needed it, and he's also kind of taking care of her, and he's never overtly, like, saying, "I'm into you," or, like,
Agree.
whatever. He's
Mhm.
showing her in so many small ways, like, "I care for you, and I'm
Yes.
here for you, and you are really a bad cook, so I'm gonna cook something."
Yes. I think you did it in such a fun way, and I think I that is so true to the story. It gave her a break. She was able to get her mind off of so many things that were happening, and then it also, for me as the reader, even though I was so, like, intentionally, like, looking for details, trying to find out what she was gonna, like, do next, it made me think about her differently as I was going through the story. It's like, wow, she's human. She is so human that she also thinks about her dad. She also wants to potentially be in a relationship or maybe not be in a relationship, but all the things because of that scene. So I think, again, another scene really, really, really well
Oh, thanks.
written.
I love those,
Yeah.
like, kind of quiet domestic type scenes, I guess.
Mhm.
But it also gives a break to the reader because for you, like, maybe there's, like, a lot of stuff happening, there's tension, you're like, "What the heck's gonna happen next?" But
Yeah.
all of us live three-dimensional lives, We're not
It's
like,
so
even
true.
if she is this, like, budding young activist, you can't be an activist 24/7, I mean, you gotta eat.
Yeah, you do. You do have to eat. That is so true.
And you have other things. Sometimes it's funny because Internment, which is my second novel, it's
Mhm.
like a near future speculative where Muslims are put into internment camps in a
And
parallel.
which is one of Narin's favorite books, by the way,
Oh,
and she's read it with her, I think it was 8th graders, I think? Talks
oh,
about it all the time. She reminded me to tell you that she loves you and she appreciates you, and it is one of her favorite books. So, as you mentioned it, I have to
oh,
tell you that. Yeah, she
thank you.
she loves that book so much. So I was rubbing it in her face a little bit that I'd read your next book before her, so she said, "I don't wanna talk about it."
Okay, well, I'm sending all the love back. That's so sweet that she's reading it with her students. And so in that book, so we have this character who is in a horrible situation, like literally illegally incarcerated behind barbed wires with her family. And there's all these horrible things happening to her. But at the same time, she's thinking about her old high school and like her prom because
Yeah.
she's a kid. And some people were like, "Oh my god, how could she be thinking about such like, frivolous things when she's in the situation?" I was like, "Because you would also be thinking about stuff like that too because you're thinking
Uh,
like, "Hey, that boy I liked, he's not in here with me. Is he
mhm,
going to prom with someone else?" Because we're just humans and our minds go there. We're
mhm,
not one-dimensional. And
mhm.
yes, you know what? Sometimes when we're going through the hardest crap, our mind goes to something that's like damn, I really want a burger right now. You know,
Yes.
it could literally be
Yeah.
that, or I wonder what my prom dress would be like if I
Yeah.
wasn't, like, in an internment camp, and
Yep.
some readers were mad about that, and I was like, "Guys,
She's
it's
human.
she's human, it's life." Like, we all think of, like, in the most terrible, sad,
Mhm.
grief-stricken moments, of course we have moments where we're thinking about other stuff, where we're
You have to.
hoping for something different, where you're wishing for something else, where you're
Mhm.
having jealousy about something that's ridiculous
Mhm. Yes, that's normal. That is life.
because 'cause we're just people.
Yes, yes, that is life. That is life. I always ask this question at the beginning, but I wanna ask now. So tell me a little bit about little Samira. Like, who is little Samira? Tell me a little bit.
So, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. We were the first Indians to move into the town.
Wow.
Yeah, it was not a diverse town at all. Like, my graduating class in senior year, it was, like, maybe 200 kids, and there
Uh-huh.
was, like, me, there was, like, 1 there were 2 other Asian kids, a Filipino kid, a Filipino American, Chinese American. There were, like, 6 black kids.
Wow.
There were maybe 6 to 10 black kids, a handful of, Latinx kids, like
Mhm.
2 Jewish kids, like, that was,
Yep.
like, the diversity was, like, "Are you Lutheran or Presbyterian?" Um, and so it was I think that really shaped me in a lot of ways, and when I was very little, I was shy. I was nervous, it was hard to be the only one. I definitely faced some, like, really kinda crappy prejudices or microaggressions, and
Mhm.
even from, like, teachers who liked me, like, the ones who would be like, "Oh, well, you're Indian, so you know everything about this." And I was like, "Dude, I'm in 3rd grade, no." Like, I don't.
Leave me alone.
I there's, like, 70 languages spoken in India, I don't speak
Yeah.
all of them. Or, your food smells funny, your lunch smells funny, and so I
Mhm.
just wanted the stupid, like, turkeys and cheese sandwiches
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
could have been having, like, actually good food. I
Yeah.
mean, like, Wonder Bread was like, "Wow, what is can we
Wonder
get
Bread.
it?" It's, like, expensive, it's like the expensive white bread, and it's soft, but I didn't that was but then as I got older, I think I knew I was sort of, like, the one who would stick out, so I decided to lean into it so I would stick out more.
Mm.
And so by the time I got to, like, junior high, it was called junior high back then, it was, like, so long ago, and high school, I was definitely becoming more political. I was, like, watching like, I was a kid who would be watching I would literally watch, like, the Democratic National Convention. Like, I would be watching that stuff. I would be learning about these things. I loved the concept of civil disobedience. And, I would even dress like I was like it was the '80s, so I was definitely like the kid dressing on in clothes from the thrift store, but then, like, blinging them out in some way or something different, like, I have these pictures of me and I was like, "My god, how big is this this jacket I'm wearing?" I had this, like, vest that I bought and I put all these, like, buttons, like, on the back of it, and I made them into, like, a peace sign. It was
That's so dope though. That
I,
is
like,
I think
had
that is so
like,
cool.
I would wear, like I mean, it was very random, like, I remember this coat that I had that I loved, and I'm like, I don't even know where it is, but it was, like, a man's, like, winter sort of, like, trench coat style, like, this, like, wool coat, and I had found, like, also in the thrift store this, like, gold chain belt, and I wore it
Mhm.
on top of the coat, like, and I was like, "Oh my god, what was I doing?" But I also was, like especially by senior year, I was a lot more political, even junior year, I was always challenging, like, our American studies, our US government, like, teachers about things, and I was editor of the school newspaper. I wrote, like, an op-ed about the school administration and
Wow.
how I compared them to the Wizard of Oz and how they were always, like, hidden behind a curtain and they weren't present or accountable to students.
How old were you when you
I was a
did
se I was
this?
a senior in high school, so I was editor of the newspaper, but when that came out, it was hilarious because every administrator that day came into like one of my classrooms and was like, "I'm just here to say hi to Samira and let you know that I'm present." I actually think it was pretty ballsy that the school newspaper, like the teacher who was running that, let us
You
put
that you
that.
run it. Yes.
Yes, because nowadays I don't know if they would.
No, they definitely
Um,
wouldn't. They definitely
I
would.
I was really inspired by the Tinkers, like this case in the 19th. It was like during the Vietnam War. These kids in Iowa, these brother and sister wore these like black armbands, and
Mhm.
in protest of the Vietnam War,
Mhm.
and the school tried to get them to take it off, and this is a case that ultimately went to the Supreme Court, Tinker v. Des Moines, and it I was so into this case that, like, I was like, "Oh my god, kids can protest stuff, kids can, like, do this kind of thing," so that when our teachers my senior year were negotiating their school contract, they
Mhm.
were they were informationally picketing. They weren't yet on they didn't go on strike, but they were informationally picketing, like, before school, after school, and for folks who don't know what that means in terms of labor union, they were not striking, they were still doing their jobs, but they're literally walking around with, like, giant picket
Wow.
signs, like, "We need a contract," whatever. So I, like, organized, like, a bunch of the kids to wear black armbands in support of the teachers.
Wow. That is a story. That's a story.
So I yeah, so I think by the time I was older, I was sort of like, "Well, I know I'm the only one, and instead of trying to hide, might as well just lean into that."
Mhm.
And I definitely think there's kids I mean, I definitely think there's a couple routes that kids can take. Like, you can either, like, feel like I'm gonna just try to hide myself a little bit, which I definitely did, especially as I was younger,
Of course.
or I stick out anyway, might as well stick out more and
Yeah.
be my own weird self. But
I
I mean, I still did, like, all the activities in high school, and I liked them. Like,
uh-huh.
I went to the basketball games and stuff. I like that stuff. Like, I know a lot of I think sometimes I'm on panels and a lot of YA authors are like, "I hated high school," and I was like, "No, honestly, I loved it."
I think that's so dope. And I think all of that tells me so much about why the way you write that you do. Like why you write the way that you do. All the little things. Like I remember the references about like one of the kids wearing like sambas and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like of course like you do your research. Of course you know what kids are into. Like it's such a great book that
I
is
also still wear
accessible."
sambas myself.
Of course, and that's the, I think it's so cool that you put it in. Sambas have never gone out of style, but now they're just like coming back again. Like there's so many kids, like kids who are in like grade 12 now, or like you know even adults who collect shoes. Like they're looking at sambas differently now. But I love that you put it in the book because it just it's just time and place. Like right now, it's a thing. Like people are looking at sambas differently, and when you look back on this book specifically in history, I think that little moment of putting something like a samba in the book as well is just another layer. Honestly, it is such
One,
another
but
layer.
also those are choices when you're making those choices, that's also character development, right? Like, if one
Totally.
of the boys has, like, like, very expensive sneakers, but is kind of a poser, you kind of get that they're just getting it for the money, as
Exactly.
opposed to, like, a lot of my characters wear their like, they wear, like, the shoes that I did because all of those things from the '80s and '90s are coming back now. Like, Doc Martens,
Yep.
they were always wearing scuffed Doc Martens, like, they're all-stars, they got
Hmm.
the Sambas, um, but the thing that's great about all like, especially Docs and Sambas now, is that they are so much lighter than when I
Yeah.
was in high school. Like, my Doc Martens weighed, like, 10 pounds each, and now I was like, "Oh my god, these are so light," 'cause,
I could actually walk in these now.
I know, exactly. But yes, of course, I had Doc Martens when I was a kid, and I had and now I still
Tavera, I want to. I mean, we could talk about this forever, but I want to. Where can people find you online?
So you can find me at samirahmed.com, my website, and I'm mostly now that Twitter's completely been taken over by Nazis, I'm mostly on Instagram. You can find me at Sam I_M. That's SAM_AYE_AHM. Yeah,
That's
that's
amazing. And if you don't know, we have been talking about the book. And I hate asking authors this, but feel free to share anything else that you have coming up. I know you're also saying you're going to go on a break, which is very nice and well deserved.
thank
Definitely
you.
well deserved.
it's also really important. You know what? Sometimes taking a break is the way to get sort of your creativity and the joy of creativity and curiosity back.
Mm, mhm,
I wish everyone could take breaks. I mean, I'm gonna take a little break from writing
mhm,
because that actually helps my writing. So I'm very privileged to be able to do that. I wish everyone could be able to do that.
mm,
So, coming up next, I do have a book that's coming out basically a year from now. It hasn't been announced yet, but I can tell you, it's actually also a speculative novel, and speculative is basically like contemporary. I write it as contemporary, but with like some kind of a twist that is not like real world in a way. So it can be like a little bit of a sci-fi twist, which is what this one has, but it's a story set in it's about a girl lost in the multiverse, and I'm kind of describing it as it's like the Midnight Library meets Everything Everywhere All at Once with a little whiff of They Both Die at the End.
oh, wow.
So, I mean, yes, those are very great comps. It's not gonna be exactly all of those, but those are sort of the closest comps that I'm
I'm
getting, but
sold.
I think it's gonna I'm writing it right now, I'm doing the copy edits, and I really
Wow,
love it. I'm gonna hopefully announce it soon, so
wow.
I'll be sharing that and the cover and everything else once I have it, but
Friend,
yeah,
thank you so much. This was such a treat for me, to talk books, get to know you a little bit better. I'm sending all the positive vibes your way, and again, I appreciate what you do for humans. You're amazing. So thank you.
thank you so much for having me. Big love going your way, and I appreciate also your understanding because I've had to reschedule this a few times.